In 2012, the world watched in suspense as a solar superstorm nearly knocked Earth off its axis. Although it only narrowly missed our planet, this near miss was still enough to send an electric current surging through parts of the world's power grid. And it's not hard to imagine what would happen if a similar event were to strike again, but with much worse timing. You might think of the sun as a big yellow ball that hangs in the sky providing light and heat to the Earth every single day. But the sun is actually a giant ball of burning plasma held together by its own gravity. Every second, millions of nuclear fusion reactions occur within its core, converting hydrogen to helium and releasing enormous amounts of energy into the process. This energy eventually makes its way to the surface and radiates out into space as light and heat. However, the sun doesn't just emit light and heat in a steady stream. It also blasts huge amounts of charged particles into space in massive bursts known as solar flares. When these bursts hit the Earth, they can disrupt our communications and power grids, but it's really nothing compared to what happens when the sun goes dark. Every 11 years, the sun's activity undergoes dramatic changes due to a process called a solar maximum. During this time, the sun's magnetic field flips and sunspots become more numerous and more active. Solar flares and coronal mass ejections, or CMS, become more frequent and powerful during these periods. And although these events normally pose little threat to the Earth, scientists are concerned about what might happen when the next solar maximum coincides with a strong El Niño event like the one predicted for 2023. That is because a powerful El Niño could combine with the already turbulent conditions at the sun to create a perfect storm that could leave the Earth virtually defenseless against the sun's worst attacks. To make matters worse, we may be approaching the peak of another even more dangerous cycle of the sun's activity known as a solar grand maximum. And it may be only a matter of time before the sun's wrath is fully unleashed upon us. So join us as we explore what would happen to the Earth if the sun were to go dark. For most of human history, the sun was seen as a malevolent deity that decided whether people lived and died. As recently as the Middle Ages, eclipses were believed to be omens of divine retribution. In reality, however, solar eclipses occur when the moon passes between the sun and the Earth, casting its shadow on the sunlit part of the Earth. Total solar eclipses only occur about twice a year somewhere on the planet, but lunar eclipses are far more common. But while some cultures viewed lunar eclipses as an opportunity for the moon to bathe in the blood of the righteous, others saw them as a chance for evil spirits to feast on the life essence of the living. The scientific explanation for these phenomena is far less colorful. Lunar eclipses occur when the Earth casts a shadow on the moon. They are far more common than solar eclipses because the Earth and the moon are much closer to each other than the Earth and the sun. Even though we now understand the science behind these astronomical events, we still have a lot to learn about the sun and how it affects our planet. For example, we know that the sun emits a constant stream of charged particles called the solar wind. But we're still working to understand the sun's influence on the Earth's atmosphere and climate. One thing we do know is that the sun is responsible for the beautiful auroras that light up the night sky in high-latitude regions. But while these natural light shows are a marvel to behold, they are also a reminder of the destructive power the sun holds over our planet. Solar storms occur when the solar wind reaches the Earth and interacts with our planet's magnetic field. This interaction can cause the magnetic field to become distorted and the charged particles from the solar wind to be funneled toward the poles. There they collide with atoms and molecules in the upper atmosphere, exciting them to higher energy levels. When the excited particles return to their normal energy levels, they release photons of light, creating the beautiful auroras that we see. But these same particles can also disrupt important things like our communications and power grids. As we mentioned earlier, the sun goes through an 11-year cycle of increasing and decreasing activity. During the active period known as solar maximum, the sun's magnetic field flips and sunspots become more numerous and more active. This means that solar flares and coronal mass ejections become more frequent and powerful. Although these events normally pose little threat to the Earth, scientists are concerned about what might happen when the next solar maximum coincides with a strong El Niño. That is because a powerful El Niño could combine with the already turbulent conditions at the sun to create a perfect storm that could leave the Earth virtually defenseless against the sun's wrath. Eclipses get all the attention, but there's a lot more to the story. You see, the sun is constantly bombarding the Earth with radiation. While this radiation is normally blocked by the ozone layer, solar storms can damage the ozone layer, allowing more radiation to reach the surface. In small doses, this extra radiation can actually be beneficial, causing an increase in plant growth and boosting our immune systems. However, too much radiation can be harmful, leading to an increase in skin cancer rates and damage to the eyes and central nervous system. Radiation can also disrupt important things like our communications and power grids, causing blackouts and communication failures. If a solar storm occurs during a solar maximum, the effects will be much more severe. During these periods, the sun is more active, meaning that solar flares and coronal mass ejections are more likely to occur. If one of these events were to strike the Earth, it could cause widespread blackouts and communication failures. It could even knock satellites out of the sky, leaving us without GPS or internet service for weeks or even months. If this happened during a time of conflict, it could be catastrophic. A solar grand maximum is a period of unusually high solar activity that occurs roughly every 200 years. These periods can last for decades and are associated with an increase in the frequency and severity of solar storms. While solar grand maxima are beneficial for some parts of the world, they can be devastating for others. For example, the Maunder Minimum, which occurred between 1645 and 1715, was a period of low solar activity that coincided with the Little Ice Age, a period of cooler than average temperatures in the northern hemisphere. This lack of solar activity is thought to have contributed to the cold temperatures and may have played a role in the colder climate. In contrast, the Spira Minimum, which occurred between 1420 and 1530, was a period of low solar activity that coincided with a warmer than average period in the northern hemisphere. This may have been due to the fact that the Earth was coming out of the Little Ice Age and returning to more normal temperatures. During a grand solar maximum, the sun's magnetic field becomes more twisted and complex, which can lead to more frequent and intense solar storms. These storms can disrupt important things like our communications and power grids, causing blackouts and communication failures. They can also damage the ozone layer, allowing more radiation to reach the surface. Too much radiation can lead to an increase in skin cancer rates and damage to the eyes and central nervous system. If a solar storm occurs during a grand solar maximum, the effects will be much more severe. During these periods, the sun is more active, meaning that solar flares and coronal mass ejections are more likely to occur. If one of these events were to strike the Earth, it could cause widespread blackouts and communication failures. It could even knock satellites out of the sky, leaving us without GPS or internet service for weeks or even months. If this happened during a time of conflict, it could be catastrophic. So what would happen to the Earth if the sun were to go dark? Well, it depends on how long the sun stays dark. For a few days, we might be able to get by, but eventually our food and water supplies would start to dwindle. Without refrigeration, food would spoil quickly and water would become scarce. Eventually, we would have to resort to rationing. After a week or so, people would start to die from starvation and dehydration. Those who survived would face a new challenge, namely the lack of sunlight. Sunlight is essential for photosynthesis, the process by which plants convert sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water into glucose and oxygen. Without sunlight, plants would die, which would mean that no animals that eat plants would survive. After a month or so, the Earth would become a barren wasteland. The sun is the center of our solar system and the source of life on Earth. Without it, our planet would freeze and we would die. Fortunately, the sun isn't going to go dark anytime soon. But it's important to remember that the sun is a powerful force that we can't control. We need to take steps to protect ourselves from its wrath, such as developing early warning systems for solar storms and building more resilient infrastructure. Otherwise, we could be left without power and communication for weeks or even months. And don't forget to stay tuned for more videos about the amazing and sometimes terrifying power of the sun. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.